Dr. Anna Kingsford, an insightful English theosophist of the 1880s, was said to be clairvoyant from the time she could speak. She herself felt that she came from the fairy realm and was given permission to be born as a human being so as to carry out her destiny. At the tender age of 13, Anna wrote the book, Beatrice, A Tale of the Early Christians. Her early wisdom can be seen in the following excerpt. How foolish are they who seek to promote their own comfort by making it their sole study. They lose the very object of their desires and invariably render themselves restless and unhappy. While maintaining her spiritual and vegetarian interests, Anna Kingsford became a doctor. Not only was she one of the first female medical doctors in England, she graduated from medical school without experimenting on any animals. The subject of her medical degree thesis was vegetarianism and ethics. This led Dr. Kingsford to the writing and publishing of a well-received book, The Perfect Way in Diet. Dr. Kingsford continued with her inner spiritual and mystical experiences, which she documented in several books, in collaboration with longtime friend Edward Maitland. She also became known as an outspoken animal and women's rights activist. In The Perfect Way, or The Finding of Christ, the spiritual values of Christianity and Theosophy are merged to identify the Christ principle which everyone is capable of discovering within. We now share with you selections from the book's 5th lecture, which highlights the impermanence of our physical world compared to the true and eternal nature of the divine. And while these higher realms manifest through a myriad of physical forms, our true nature is only freed after the divine spirit within has reconnected with God. The 5th lecture, The Constitution of Existence, Part 3. Thus does the science of things, material and transient, present us with the image of things substantial and eternal, and thus does knowledge of the phenomenal minister to the divine gnosis. As is the microcosm, so also is the macrocosm. As is the cell, so is the man, so the planet, and so the solar system. And in all, the order of creation is that set forth in the opening chapter of the truly hermetic book of Genesis, the work of the 4th day, being in each the manifestation of the sun, the nucleolus or central spirit of the system, by the polarization of all the elements of the system, and so of the whole universal cosmos, mystically termed the Grand Man. The nucleolus is the macrocosmic God. The nucleus is the divine substance, the heavenly waters upon and within which moves the spirit or life. That is, the nucleolus, the protoplasmic fluid, is the manifest ether, interplanetary as well as intermolecular, the medium of light, heat, and electricity. And finally, the cell membrane is matter, in its visible and tangible condition. Of these 4 we know that God and substance are alone eternal and absolute, matter and the astral ether being derived and relative. It is in these last that the infinite substance particularizes itself. The various individual finite forms thus arising constitute what Spinoza calls modi. These are to substance what the waves are to the sea, shapes that perpetually die away that never are. Nothing finite is possessed of a self-subsistent individuality. The finite individual exists indeed because the unlimited productive power of substance must give birth to an infinite variety of particular finite forms. But these have no proper reality. Substance is the only real. But that which is true of substance as a whole is true also of it in subdivision. Substance individualized is still substance, and each segregated portion of it undergoes similar changes in respect of manifestation. The error which has arisen in connection with the Spinozic doctrine consists in the application of the term modus to the essential self of the individual, whereas the truth is that this self, being actually divine and having by the process known as creation acquired individuality, is like God, permanent both in being and in personality, and changeable only as to the mode of its manifestation in matter. It is this material modus, which is transient and unreal, belonging, as it does, to that world of phenomenon or illusion, which is expressed in Hindu philosophy by the term Maya. That which is real and permanent in the individual is thus to be conceived of as an integral portion of that divine self, who subsists at once both as an infinite whole and in infinite subdivision. In the right apprehension of this doctrine lies the reconciliation of esoteric Christianity with esoteric Buddhism. Esoteric Christianity teaches the everlasting permanence of the acquired personality of every redeemed individual. Esoteric Buddhism insists that personality is an illusion belonging to the sphere of existence, on the ground that permanent being is necessarily impersonal inasmuch as it is one. The explanation is that there are to each individual two personalities, the one phenomenal and therefore transient, the other substantial and therefore permanent. And while Buddhism declares truly the evanescence of the former, Christianity declares truly the permanence of the latter, representing, as does this latter personality, the sum total of all that the individual really is, the force which animates and the substance which constitutes him. It corresponds in the organic cell to the nucleus, the false outer personality, vulgarly taken for the real, having its correspondence in the protoplasmic body, which falls away and disperses at the breakup of the cell. Recognition between soul and soul will be finally possible only according to the degree of love which, during their passage through the phenomenal, may have united them. For such love, only as has been intense and divine enough in its nature to penetrate beyond the mere outer personality into the true being, will be everlasting in duration. All lesser and lower loves, cares, attractions, affinities, or interests belong wholly to the terrestrial, and, when physical disintegration occurs, are abandoned to the astral atmosphere. In this atmosphere, they continue to exist, just so long as the respective vitality of each particle permits. As in the parenchyma of the tissues, do the protoplasmic corpuscles set free by the breaking up of the cell. All principles endure. Whatever during the soul's experience of transient personality has, in any incarnation, acquired the nature of principle, that is, of being, is ultimately absorbed by and continues to exist in the permanent personality when, having completed its kalpa, it is finally redeemed from existence. For principles are essential and therefore indestructible, being indefeasible properties of deity. For this reason, it is said that in heaven everything is personal, the idea of personality being inherent in every molecule of the infinite person, the return into oneness with whom constitutes nirvana. Redemption is thus exhibited as the final cause of creation, for therein existence returns into being, phenomenon into essence, matter into spirit. The universe reverts to its Sabbath of perfection, and God rests from the work of manifestation. It is, in fact, the acquirement of true personality that constitutes immortality, and therefore redemption. Perdition consists in failure to attain permanence as a person, and implies therefore dissolution and dissipation, for, as all is of God, annihilation of the substance of things is impossible. Consisting of the substance of God, and differentiated only by mode and not by nature, the creature possesses the potentiality of the Creator, and is capable of attaining to the condition of God. Thus the nucleolus, or divine spirit, appears to be spontaneously generated in the nucleus or soul, because all substance is penetrated, suffused and charged with the spirit from the beginning, though it is not manifested until the element of the nucleus or soul is polarized in such a degree as no longer to disperse, but to converge, and thereby render manifest the divine light subsisting, latent in its substance. This operation is the analogue of the polarization of physical light, a process consisting of a certain modification of the luminous ray, by virtue of which, once reflected or refracted, it becomes incapable of reflecting or refracting itself again in any but one direction. This condition of the ray, which under the old theory of emission was founded on the conception of a material fluid of light, must now be held to depend on the parallel direction assumed by the magnetic poles of all the molecules of ether constituting the vehicle of the ray. In like manner, when the molecules of the psychic element are so directed that their axis all converge to a central point, in accordance with this law of polarization or gravitation, which, as has been said, is the one law alike of matter and of spirit, the whole will of the soul is single and harmoniously centralized throughout all its elementary molecules. In such a soul, the divine spirit, latent and permanent before its polarization, becomes centralized and manifest.
Vegan side effect? Feel your good will powers huge increase? Ah, not to worry.
Insightful viewers, it's been a pleasure to have your company for today's words of wisdom.